All right, let's get started. I'll just share my screen. Start the slideshow. So basically, we are going to be talking about introduction to filmmaking. So let's get on with it, right? So the first question obviously is before we know what we are making, it's important for us to understand what exactly a film is. So the most basic thing that you need for a film are, is a video, basically. Uh, Edited, unedited, doesn't matter, but it has to be a video for it to be a film. Now we call it a film because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but earlier there used to be different kind of slots. They were called films, and basically they used to capture images. When you move images at a certain speed, it looks like the images are moving, and that is why it was called a film. So the most basic thing to understand when we are discussing filmmaking is what a film is. And here, like I think you have already understood, it is basically moving images. So a film is moving images, which usually is supported by other aspects. Like there is sound, there's animation, there's lighting to it, there's an actor, there are some directional points and such. Now, before we go any further, okay, ah, we actually do have a question. I'll answer that later, man. Uh, Srihan. Okay. Srihan, I'll answer that after we are done with this entire thing. But yeah, that's actually a very genuine and good question. So to continue, once we have decided the product, which is a film, now we have to decide what that product is gonna be. So if you guys were working or maybe making your own things, your own products, for example, to sell, you have to know whether it's an eatable, something that you eat that you're gonna sell, is it something that you wear, is it a cosmetic, etc., etc. So in the case of films, we do this exact very same thing. We have to tell others what sort of a film is it going to be. And this is what genre is all about. You must have heard a lot of people ask you this question like, what is your favorite genre of films? Or this is a horror film. So horror is a genre. It basically tells you what the film entails, what is going to happen in the film, what sort of expectations you should have from the film. So we are very slightly going to discuss genre before we get on with the real things. Not the real things, but the elements. So now you know that you are making a film, moving images. The next thing you know is that what sort of a film you want it to be. So there are majorly 5 to 6 different genres, and there are subgenres in it, but we won't be discussing the subgenres, just the overall genres. Okay. So if this were a live thing, I would have asked you guys to answer like what do you think are the 5 major genres, but I don't think you guys can chat or even respond to it. So I'll quickly break it down for you guys. So for some reason, what yeah, genres, yeah. So the first one is comedy. If the film makes you laugh, it is either a very bad film which was meant to be serious, or it is a comedy film. That is why the genre is there. So you know, if it's a comedy film you are going to watch, you'll probably be laughing. So if it makes you laugh, if it makes the audience laugh, you're going for a comedy film. If it makes the audience cry, so I'll give you a quick example of comedy films. There was this series of films called Golmaal. If any one of you have watched, I'm not entirely sure about your age demographics, but I'm going to assume that at least some of you have watched films like Houseful or Golmaal, and these films are comedy films. They are meant to make you laugh. So that's comedy. The second one is drama. Drama films invoke different kind of emotions in people, but majorly happy or sad or even questionable feelings. I'm not entirely sure how to explain it, but it's like, you feel like you want to do more. Like, you want to go out, you want to travel, you want to do this, you want to do that. Like, basically, drama films motivate your emotions. A good example of a drama film. would have been Tare Zameen Par, but I'm not sure if anyone of you has watched it. Again, I'm sorry. I'll just give a couple of examples. If you guys are interested, note them down, check them out later. You'll understand what I'm talking about. The third one is action film. So action film is where you see people fighting, jumping off the building roofs, and I don't know, somersaulting through alleys, that sort of a thing. A very good example of an action film would be John Wick. There's a fourth part coming out into 2023, I think. So John Wick would be an action film. Then there's fantasy. Fantasy is basically something that doesn't really happen in real life. I know most of the films don't actually happen in real life. In action films, there's also almost all of Salman Khan films are action films in a way. Now, when we get to fantasy, fantasy is more about things that do not happen, and by that I do not mean about their probability to happen, but things that are not true. Like, for example, there being a dragon in your film, or a story about fairies or mermaids and stuff like this. These are fantasies. They do not happen in real life. So that's a fantasy film. And the fifth one, of course, is horror. Horror is meant to scare you. It doesn't always have to have a ghost, but mostly when it has mostly they do have ghosts or supernatural things that happen in the film. So these are majorly the five genres. So let's assume that we are cooking, right? And film is the food that we are cooking. So in this case, I'm going to tell you the basic recipes of how to make a film. What about thrillers? Advik, that's a good question. Like I said, I'll only be broadly touching the genres. Thriller is a genre, that's true, and it's an independent genre. It doesn't fall in either of these five. But majorly, if I were to consider thriller as one of the major genres, I wouldn't, because it also falls slightly in the action and drama section. Like thrillers usually have some amount of drama, some amount of horror, and some amount of action. So it is an independent genre, but it's not completely independent in that sense, if you know what I mean. Okay, now that we have answered that question, moving on from genres. So yes, so like I was saying, if film is the food that we are preparing, we're in this session today, we are basically going to discuss the recipe. So genre is basically the dish that you have decided. Is it going to be a sweet dish? Is it going to be a salty dish? Is it going to be spicy? So basically, that is what genre does. Once you have decided what sort of a dish you want to make, then we go further in, and then we get to basically elements of a film. So again, I would have asked what are the things that you need to make a film. But since you guys can't answer, I'll be answering it all by myself. If you have any questions, you can like shoot them up, and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. So for elements of a film, first you need a story. Now you see, you can make TikTok videos, you can make reels, you can make a lot of different things. But though they are films in a sense, they are not the kind of films we are talking about. For me personally, currently, I'm more interested in explaining what a film, as in a feature film with a story, entails. I am not going to discuss videos here, but films. So, for you to be able to make a film, the first thing that is very important that you need is to have a story. There should be a story to your film, like something should be happening. Take example of any films that you like. There is a story, something is happening, right? The second is the sound. You might not directly notice it, but even if there are no dialogues, there is still uh, a background score, a background music that is being played in the background of the characters, and you can hear it, you can hear them. So sound is very important in that sense. It basically gives you a specific emotion to feel. It makes you feel very specifically. If it's a very hyped music, you'll feel all hyped up. If it's a sad music, you'll feel sad. So they basically support the visuals. The third obviously comes the visuals. If there are no visuals, a story and sound would make a very good podcast or a radio show, but it wouldn't be a film. So you definitely need visuals. Fourth are the costumes. Now you guys might feel like, okay, why is a costume necessary? Like, can't I just shoot without costumes? Well, we'll get to that later, right? But just keep this in mind for the moment. That costume is just as important. The fifth part is editing, of course. Why? Again, I'll explain later. Then there's lighting, there's acting, there's animation, visual effects, and lastly, the most important part is the direction. Now, you can't make a film without these elements. I mean, of course, you can make a film without these elements to a certain extent, but not completely. Why? I'll explain as we go further. Okay. Now, I want to discuss basically the stages of a film. So these are the elements that need to be mixed in. So these are your spices. These are going to go into your dishes. But have you ever like okay, some of you might have heard that there is this process called marination. When you try to make something, you have to prep it before you actually put it out in a cooker or anything else. So filmmaking has a similar process. The first thing is called pre-production. That is basically prepping your spices for your dish. Then production, which is basically cooking it, cooking your dish. And finally, we have post-production, which is serving the dish that you have. Okay. Okay. Dev Darshan has a question that he cannot understand visuals. And Shrihan also has another question which says, Sir, doesn't the animation and visual come under editing or have their own called VFX and GFX editing? So, yes, you're right. Devdarshan, first of all, visuals is basically what you're seeing right now. Whatever you see is the visual. What you shoot with the camera is the visual. So visual is basically something that you have shot with your camera, some video that you have. That's the visual. Okay. And Shrihan, not really. Editing is basically stitching the video up. You have different shots, you have different video bites, and you basically stitch them up together and you make them into a film. Then you basically add VFX. Then you have VFX, which is visual effects, and not really animation, but graphics. I wasn't entirely sure if everyone would get the term. That's why I used the word visual effects and animation. But yes, you are partially right that it is a part of post production, but it doesn't exactly fall into editing. Lighting, yes, sir. I'll get to it. Don't worry. We still have about 40 minutes to discuss this out. Okay. Okay. Going forward, like I discussed, pre-production, guys, production, and post-production. Now, pre-production is basically the part where your entire film is being made on a piece of paper. It's all in the planning, guys. If you do not plan properly, you'll end up with problems when you get to the production. It's basically like if you do not buy the right vegetables and you get to the cooking part, you won't have the right vegetables that you need to cook. And then you'll have to rush back to the pre-production part. That is the prepping part, get those vegetables back, cut them up, chop them up, and then continue with the cooking. So pre-production is that stage where the prep has to be complete. If you lack here, if you go lax here, you are going to burn your dish, brother. So pre-production is the most important part of a film. It basically has a few more bits than these, but I'm majorly just pointing out the ones uh, that you need to know to start with. Eventually, there'll be more. Eventually, as you continue, I'm sorry, give me a second, please. Okay, all good. So eventually, as you guys continue making films, you'll learn about a lot of different things. Like here, I have not mentioned screenplay or other aspects of pre-production, but you don't actually need to know them now. When you're starting out, the most important thing is think of a story. There has to be a story to show, like what is going to happen in your film. That is the story. Then there are scripts and dialogues. Dialogues are necessary to first make the film look natural. Like if I meet you, for example, Shrihan, if you and I are having a conversation, there are certain things I'm going to say, and there are certain things Shrihan is going to say. So there'll be a couple of conversations. That is basically dialogues that we add to our characters in the film. And script is the very same thing. It basically lists the dialogues and in which order they are going to be said, right? So the story, then there's script and dialogues. Then there's casting. Now again, casting might look a bit weak here. Like you might think like, why do I need to cast? I have got a lot of friends, they can play different characters, but it's not always like that, right? And unless you start thinking about how you want to cast and who you want to cast, you won't be able to bring out the authenticity in your films. Like, let me quickly get to it. Then there's also locations. The same thing. Locations are just as important. I have actually worked with a couple of directors who ended up taking about a month just to fix a place where the character lives. Like, they had multiple options. They had about 30, 40 different houses that they visited, but they didn't give green light to any of them because they weren't happy with the places, the houses. So we had to look for a house for about a month before we actually ended up finding one that the director approved of. So locations, those seems lousy, but a lousy take on this list, but it's still very important to go through. And lastly, costumes. Again, see, the authenticity of your costume basically gives authenticity to your films. If you rent, what do I say? How can I say this? If you rent a police costume, costume of a policeman, and you want someone to play the part of a policeman in your film, you have to make sure that the costume is authentic to some extent. It looks like the costume of a policeman. If you do that, you don't have to tell the audience specifically. It doesn't have to be a dialogue. You don't have to add a VO. You don't have to do anything. When someone sees the person, they'll directly know, like, ah, okay, yeah, this guy is a policeman. Oh, a cop is here. So that's why costumes are important. If you give a policeman the clothes of a doctor, no one will relate. They'll be like, okay, why is this guy investigating a murder? Isn't he a doctor? So that sort of a thing happens. And when that happens, it'll cause trouble. Why? We'll get to it soon. But now that we are done with the prep, we are basically moving on to the cooking part. So what are the steps of this part? The first part is, of course, shooting. So I think Dev Darshan asked this question. So Dev Darshan, basically, visuals is everything that you shoot. Everything and anything that you have shot is visuals. So since you need visuals, it's a very important element. You of course have to shoot. So shooting is a part of production. The second most important thing is lighting. Now the thing is, again, so this is a question you had asked earlier. You see, I have got a light here, and that is basically why you can see me. So if you have a character in your film and the character is supposed to be sad, but you don't have enough lights, and by that I do not mean practical lights like this. If your character is sad, at least make him sit or stand in a place that is well lit where you can see his face. If you can see his face, you can see his expressions and you can relate. You can understand what is being said. Like, he's sad, I can see that he's sad. But if he's standing in a very dark place, I do not see what's happening. I do not know what's happening. And in that case, I basically do not get the film, the gist, the emotion of the film. So lighting is important because you have to put the person where there is light, so that what he's doing is visible. Okay, guys. The third thing is sound. Like I had already discussed, sound basically gives a very specific sort of emotions, and that is one of the reasons why you actually need to use sound like properly in your films. It is a common belief amongst filmmakers that films are an AV art, right? AV stands for audio visuals. Audio always comes before visuals. So if there's a blank screen, you don't see anything, but you hear a gunshot, you'll assume that someone got shot, a gun was fired. But if you see a gun and no one and you don't hear a sound of it shooting, you'll think that the gun never shot the bullet, right? So that's why sound is very important. This is SFX, basically sound effects, but that's all. That also goes with background scores. Like any movie that you watch has background scores for the very same reason. It is there to give you a certain kind of emotion. Like you go through this very specific controlled emotional tour that you start feeling the character or the situation. So that is what sound does, and that is why it is important. The fourth is of course acting. It's you like get four random guys who can't act and you want them to be sad, but they don't know how to be sad. They won't be able to like tell the audience that they are sad or happy or whatever. If they can't act and they cannot portray what you want them to portray as a director, then it's going to be troublesome because your audience won't get what actually happened, right? And it'll also take you very long to be able to finish what you want to. Like you'll have to get these guys, you'll have to keep on telling them to do the very same thing for 20th, 30th, 40th time before they can actually do it. So always go for someone who can basically act. If you are taking a character, select someone who can do a bit at least. Okay. And the fifth and the most important part is the direction. So a film is not only a collection of videos, it is basically what's happening in those videos. Direction is exactly that. It basically gives direction to the film, like what is supposed to happen next. That is why we need direction. We have someone who's is asking, sir, we can use movie maker application for what, my friend, or filmmaker? I do not really get your question. I'm slightly confused. I'm sorry there. Uh, you can use movie maker application to exactly do what? Well, I'll get back to it. From cooking, now we're going to the plating. That's post production, and that involves editing, sound effects, visual effects. So VFX, like our friend had just Dev Darshan? No, I think Shrihan had mentioned. So VFX is basically visual effects. What is visual effects? I'll get to it later, but let's start with the processes anyway. So editing, sound effects, and visual effects. Now moving on. First of all, why is casting important? So I said I'll explain why it's important, right? Now you see there are two people. Imagine these are the two character. These are two people you've got, and you want to cast one of them as the father. Now, which one do you think will suit for the role of a father? It's the guy on the right, right? Because he looks like someone who's slightly older, might have kids, who could play the father. The other guy is too young; he cannot play father. So that's why you cast. You look for people who will basically fill the role and make it seem genuine, make it seem authentic. So in this case, we'd go for the guy on the right. Doesn't it depend on the storyline? Of course, it depends on the storyline. That's true, and that's where we get to this. So the next question is, which of these three guys would basically suit the role of a villain? Now you see, the point is, all three of them can be the villain. The guy on the right might be someone more aggressive if you need them. The guy in the center could just be a brilliant mastermind, like I don't know, Sherlock Holmes, Professor Moriarty. He could probably play Professor Moriarty. Probably all three of them can play Professor Moriarty. It's the way you show them. The last guy, even he could be a villain in some story. So of course, there's no one right answer to this, but it is important that you select that which of these guys can basically play the role. So here, if I want someone aggressive, I see the third guy has got a scar on his face. I'll probably go for him. If I want to show someone who's very elusive, who's like someone you don't expect to be a villain sort of character, I'll probably go for the man in the middle. And if I want to show someone who's very bossy in nature as a villain, I'll probably go for the man on the left. But that's a general way of looking at it. But like I said, there's one, you have to select who you want to have as your actor. Two, you have to work on what sort of a treatment you're giving your actor, your characters, to be able to pick who you want as the very specific character. Now, this is again the third thing. If you were to cast someone as a school student, which one of these two do you think you'd go for? It would be the girl on the left because, according to her age, she fits the bill more than the lady on your right. Which she's older, you do not expect a middle-aged woman to play the character, to play the role. No, no, no. So casting doesn't mean giving out characters. Okay, casting is something very different. Casting basically means selecting who you want as your basically. So casting is basically selecting who you want to play the character that you have already written. Casting is like you met Madhuri ma'am, right? And now I am here. So if you wrote a story about the kidnapper, casting would be deciding whether you want Madhuri ma'am to be the kidnapper or me the kidnapper. So that's casting. Basically, selecting actors is casting. So once we are done with casting, we move to locations. Again, why is location important? Let's just assume that your character, the lead character of your story, is a very rich guy. Now, which of these two houses do you see him in? It's the house on your right. Now, if you don't have the budget for a house on your right, and you end up shooting the guy on a house that looks like the house on your left, and you want him to seem like he's a very rich guy, people will not be able to relate. Your audience will get confused. They'll wonder, like, okay, why though? Like, if he's such a rich guy, why is he staying out like this? Why doesn't he have a big house? Why doesn't he have like a swimming pool out there? So that is why we basically look search for locations if you want to shoot something very specific. And in our case, like since I work in indie films, we usually don't have such kind of budgets, so we cut very specific elements out of our scripts as well sometimes. Like my guy, if my lead character is supposed to be very rich, but I cannot afford a location like the one on my right. And I realized that okay, there is no reason for my character to be supremely rich. He can be an average guy, then it's all sorted out. You can go for the location on your left. So these kind of things you have to take care. And this is why pre-production is very important. This is all part of pre-production. Again, moving on to the last and the final part of pre-production, which is costumes. See, the same thing. I don't have to tell you guys who these guys are. When you look at the person on your right, you know he's a soldier. You look at the lady in your center, you can assume she's a doctor. And when you look at the guy on your left, you can assume maybe he's a priest. So just because of the costume, without saying a word, you guys can basically understand who these guys are playing, what sort of characters these people are playing. So that's where costume comes into play. And the more genuine your costume is, the better it is for you. The better, sorry, that was my bad. It's the easier it is for you to explain to your audience what you are trying to portray, right? Now that we have completed the pre-production part, does anyone have any questions? I see some, like there's R Dharan, who basically asked like, which is the best video or film or movie maker application? So I'll get to it, Dharan, after this. Don't worry about it. Casting, Dev Darshan, I've already answered it. If you are still confused, you can ask it again. I'll answer again. What do you suggest as the best editor, both paid and free? Shrihan, again, I'll come to this later because this is again a part of post production. It's not a part of pre production, right? Saranya asked, sir, what about animation movies? So, animated movies is a type of film, my friend, but it's not exactly a genre. Like, it is a genre, but again, even animation films have different genres. Like, uh, let's go for My Hero Academia. It's an anime and it's an action anime. So, it's an action animated film. There's Rango. Rango is a comedy animation film. So Animation is basically the type of the film, but the genre is what sort of an animated film it is, right? Thrillers, okay. Film. Okay, I also explained lighting. Anyone else has a question between about lighting? Is there a difference between a movie and a film? There isn't actually. If I'm being honest, uh, we used to call it a film because it was being shot on a film, but people also called it movie back from the time the Lumiere brothers invented the first camera and started shooting, because movie basically means moving stuff, and till then people had only seen like static images. Since they started seeing moving things, they started calling it a movie. So movie and a film is basically the same thing. Have to get VFX. How to get VFX? Okay, so VFX shouldn't be okay. You want me to repeat about lighting? In a way, yes. Visual means making it in digital. So yeah, I mean, basically having a video to show, like something that people can see, is a visual, bro. So of course, yeah, you need. Of course, it has to be digital if you want to show them across different platforms. So yes, a video is the visual. As of for VFX, you still don't. What do you mean by graphics? I'll get to that. That's a part of post production. Okay. Uh, how to get VFX again in post production, and lastly, lighting. So someone has a question about lighting still. Lighting is basically having enough light on your character so that you can see them. The most important part. That's it. Lighting can be anything. It could be moody. It could be different. We'll get to it in the next section. So I think till costumes, it's clear to most of you guys, right? So moving on, basically quickly get to the production part. Okay. So first of all, there's direction in production. Like I already explained to you guys, direction is very important because it basically tells your characters, your actors what to do, what is going to happen next in your film. So it's not only about actors, it can also work with props. Like if you want A to kill B, is he using a gun? Is he using a knife? Why is he using a knife? Everything has a motivation, different kind of things. But that's your direction. That's what you want him to do. If you want this guy A, to stab guy B and get hurt in the process, then it's your direction. If he used a gun, he probably wouldn't get hurt. So that's why you gave him a knife. So that's a prop that you use to push your story forward. The kind of actions that you take, like, does the person decide to go walk out of the door? Does he sit here? Does he roam around the room? That's your call, and that's how it works. And again, the setup also. So that's your direction again. Do you want to like place more things in the background? Do you want to show him that even though it's not important, do you want us to believe that the person is very rich? So you place basically six different expensive cars behind him, and people will assume like, oh, he owns six cars, he's rich. It might not have anything to do with the story, but that's still a part of the direction, what you want to do with the story. Like where the story leads is direction. Next is sound. So for sound, I think someone else will be helping me out. So I'll quickly stop sharing my screen. But before we get to the actual video, I want you guys to understand like this is what happens. If you do not have the right sound for the right thing, so here we see a person with a gun and he's going to fire it. Now, if the audio doesn't actually match the video that you watch and you do not relate, you wouldn't take it seriously, okay? So I'll quickly stop sharing my screen and we play the video and then we see what happens. Yeah. So basically, if the audio doesn't match the video, it might become funny, or at the least, people will not relate. So that is why sound is very important, specifically sound effects. Sometimes you don't even have to show a person is there. Like, for example, if I'm sitting here, you already saw Aman walk in and walk out, so you know there was someone in the room. But if you just heard footsteps and you did not see anyone, you'd still know that there's a second person in the room because I'm still sitting here, right? So that's why we need sound. That's why sound is very important. Half of the time, we don't have to show a lot of things in the video itself, but we can just give them cues through the audio. That's audio. Now we are moving to lighting. So you see this? Can you guys see the image? I think the image should be visible. So when you see a film and you see that, like you see cars going through a road and the road being well lit, and there are like yellow lights, white lights, whatnot, it doesn't actually happen with the normal street lights. So this is something that might happen to you people. Like you might think of shooting something in your car with a phone, and you might think like, oh, why does it look better in films? Because well, they have got big light setups. You see, they have lights on the top of cranes. That is basically what is lighting this road up, because the number of cars are there. The camera itself will not be able to capture the cars in natural light, in the natural street light, which is already there. So that is why they do these kind of things. And when they light this place up like this, it looks something like this. You cannot achieve this without a setup like that. So do not get disheartened when you start shooting that. Oh, this doesn't look like what it looked like in the film. It won't. They have got big lights. They have got more budget, but you can always play around with it. So this is what lighting is important for. If they did not use any lights, this place, this entire section would be so dark you wouldn't be able to see the inside of a car or the character. So they basically lit up the road for you to be able to see what is happening. Who's the best editor in the world? Okay, my friend, that is a very subjective question to answer. I mean, if I'm personally speaking about an editor that I like, it would be this lady who edited Tumbad. I met her a couple of times. I forgot her name. Uh, I'll get back to it anyway. Sir, they have set lights in back of car. I do not know. No, like I do not get the question. Are you asking if they carried lights at the back of the car to place them there, or do they have do they have lights at the moment inside the car to light the car up? Because if it's the second one, then that's true. Yeah, they probably have some lights inside the car, which is basically trying to give a very basic ambient light to the entire thing, so that you can basically see what's going on. That's true. Whoever it was, that was a smart question to ask. Also, this is a very common thing that I want to share with you guys, because you guys will probably start making your own film soon. So I do not want you to think about fluorescent light. You probably won't be using a green screen. And I do not want you to basically think about the too dark light, because again, I don't think you'll have enough lights to light your sections up. But basically, there are three things you need to take care of. First is underexposed. Underexposed basically means not having enough lights to light your characters up, your actors up, which means the person, when he gives expression, when he says something or he does something, won't be visible. And if it is not visible, it will confuse your audience and they'll lose interest. Same goes for overexposed. You know, sometimes when you try to take a picture out in the sun and suddenly it seems like your friend is just way too white than he should be, that's because he's overexposed. There's just too much light. Underexposed is not having enough lights. Overexposed is having too much lights. And when you have too much lights, it's the same thing. You can't see his face properly. If you can't see his face, then well, you can't see what he's saying or doing, or what sort of expressions is he giving. Then there's too low. So this is also a technique. So if you want to show someone scary, sometimes we light at a level lower than your face. You know, you guys must have also done this. putting a torch up your face from the bottom, and you get these weird shadows, and it looks scary. So sometimes too low is used to create a scary uh, lighting situation, but usually it has the same problem. See, there is shadow over his eyebrows. So if he gives an expression, I won't be able to get it. I wouldn't know what sort of an expression he gave with his eyebrows. If it goes even further, there'll be like different shadow all over his face, and again, it'll hide his face from giving out expressions and dialogues. So these are a couple of basic things that you have to keep in mind. Someone raised their hand. I don't know why. Do you have a question? I suppose no. Okay, Dev Darshan has also raised their hand. Which is the correct lighting way? Dev Darshan, there is no correct lighting way, my friend. Different situation requires different sort of lighting. You can go, there are different kinds of lighting actually. There's mood lighting, there's practical lighting, there's again what I'm going to discuss later, which might be slightly tough for a couple of people here who are probably too young, maybe. It's called 3-point lighting. This is something that has been used for ages when it comes to shooting documentary films. And I'll quickly show you the setup. You don't really have to get into it, but it's good to know what it is. So this is 3-point lighting, right? We have three kinds of lighting. 3-point lighting is basically three lights being used on the subject itself. So there's key light, there's fill light, and there's backlight. Now, what does each of these lights do? First, you use the key to light up the subject. So here, this light would be the key light. It is lighting me up. So key light is the main light that you put on your actor. The second is the fill light, which you basically use to, like, can you see a shadow on my face when I raise my hand? That is because there's a light there as well. That is basically to balance out this entire thing, the light. If I switch it off, this light will be too strong. See, it's too dark here, it's too light here. So this basically balance it out. And then there's a third light, which you basically are supposed to shoot on your actor from behind you to separate him from the background. In my case, I don't have a third light here. So I'm just going to work with two, key and a fill. And you can see the difference. See, in here, the first image is of the key light, the main light that is being shot at the actor. The second light is the backlight and the key light that is being shot at the actor. And the third image is basically the backlight, the key light, and the fill light that is used to fill the dark spaces and give balance to the image. So this is one of the most basic sort of lighting. When you get to the cinematography part of the session, which I think of someone will be taking in the next few months, they'll probably get into it and explain what other sorts of lighting there are, lighting techniques there are. But at the moment, I'm not into cinematography, so I'll just quickly tell you what are the things that you should be expecting in the coming weeks from the different sessions. Yeah. So with the lighting part done, and unfortunately, since we don't have a lot of time, I'll again stop sharing and this video 1 second. So now we are talking about acting and editing. How to make 3D videos? Sankal, that's a good question. But you'll have to wait till I get to the post-production part, okay? Sir, I need this PPT. What to do? I'll leave it with Madhuri ma'am. She can forward it to you, okay? Okay. So now we are going to look at acting and editing. Why is acting and editing important? So this very specific clip that you guys can see is one of the worst piece of acting that has ever happened. We'll get to see why. So I'll just ask Madhuri ma'am here to show the video to you people so that you can get what I'm talking about.
Sure, one. Rajesh, can you play the video? Anurag, I think you are on mute.
See, this is what happens when you don't have a good actor. It looks so fake. I mean, no one here, I believe, is believing that this thing is actually happening in front of you. Because people don't die like this. This is not how things happen. This is not what is supposed to happen. So that this is why you need good actors, or at least decent actors, with whom the people will relate. And if they don't relate, they won't be able to relate with your entire film, not only just one actor. So that is how important an actor is for a film. And this is also a very good example of, you know, how or what bad acting actually is all about. See, I'll show you. There's something we call continuity when we edit something, right? So that piece of it that you need to basically stitch together. Here, the guy is on the bed, but when he's getting shot, he's standing up. How, if he was already on the bed, how is he standing in a couple of seconds? And this will look like a jump. Basically, we call it a jump in technical terms. So this is not something that is true. Also, you see, he got shot. There is like no blood coming out of his shirt. A couple of seconds later, see, there is blood now because he probably had the blood bag in his hand, right? And he squeezed this with his hand and made the blood come out. But again, that's a problem with the continuity. If the bullet already hit him, there should be blood there, but it's not there. This is why this is also a very good example of why you need to edit and why you need to work on continuity when you edit. If in the previous frame, in the previous video, my hand is here, and in the next video, my hand is here, your audience will notice it. They might not exactly know what happened, but they'll feel like there was a jump, something weird happened in between. And it'll take their minds off the actual film into something that they shouldn't be worrying about. So this is why we need good editing. So I'm also assuming, I am assuming a lot today, but okay, Shrihan basically asked, did he use a paint prop to get the blood on his shirt? Not really. So maybe he did, but usually when we do have these small things called blood bags. It looks something like this. It has blood in it, and basically it has a small explosive at the end, and it explodes, and then the blood comes out. Usually we have a blood bag. We don't use this, but yeah, looking at the kind of the film it was, maybe he used paint. I don't know. ABR Robin, can the director of the film also act for the film? Of course. There is this guy, I'm sure a lot of you must have heard of him. He recently made a film called Vikram. He was at least acting in it. Uh, I'm sorry. I forgot his name. Let me quickly Google. He's quite a famous guy, actually. I don't know how I forgot his name. But yes, I mean, you can obviously always act in your film. I wouldn't suggest it. Like, I don't do it because I prefer to stay behind camera and observe everything that is happening. But a lot of people do. A lot of people do. So, yeah, it's not a very big deal. Pardon?
Are you talking about Kamal Hassan?
Kamal Hassan, right? Oh, I was just looking for him. So, Kamal Hassan is one of those people who have directed films that he has also acted in. And a lot of people have done it before, actually. Even Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood is famous for doing that. So, yeah, you can always do that. Is there any other question? What's your say on Indian serial editing? Okay. So I'm not generalizing here. There are some really good Indian serials which are not that bad, but most of them commonly do happen to over edit. So there's this one thing that I was mentioning earlier. Everything needs to be in control. You can very easily over direct, over edit. You can overshoot, like for example, over light. Like you only need 3 lights, but you put in 8 lights. Ki, nahi, nahi, acha dikhna chahiye. That is a problem that always happens. Uh, so yeah, Indian serial editing is basically over editing, not editing. There's Dev Darshan, sir, which state you are in? So currently in MP, but I basically stay in Mumbai, and when I'm not in Mumbai, I stay in France. Sir, what's your opinion on K Sport directory and acting? He takes everything as a joke, but this has worked his way up to fame. That is true, my friend. So that's true even for people like Dinchak Puja and Raki Sawant and others. See, you can always make a mockery and it might work, but I wouldn't call it real filmmaking. I do think he probably tried to make something a bit more serious because he spent a lot of money on it. But he, I think, just is not very good at directing or acting. And again, that's another example of why you need good actors in your films. So, getting on to the last part of today's session, I suppose a lot of people here like Marvel films. So you see, this is what we were earlier talking about when we said VFX. Now you see this building cracking up and the floor being this destroyed and Hulk being there. This is not something you can practically do because there isn't actually someone who can turn into Hulk. You literally cannot destroy buildings like this. Maybe you can destroy a couple of buildings, but not at large scale for a film. So what they use is this. It's green screen. You see, it's green all around. Later they edit it out. They add different buildings to it. They add the sky. They add everything else. But they basically shoot it on a green screen so that they can cut the characters out. Once they cut the characters out, they can replace the background. So this is visual. This is also part of visual effects. Everything that you see, that when Thanos snaps and the random things that happen, like the waves and everything else, people destroying things, burning, people disappearing. It's all part of visual effects. So visual effects is something that is done externally after, not after, but externally on something that has already been shot, right? So this is visual effects. And I think we are almost done. So I have one more question, it seems. Sir, which is best movie making app? Which is better, Bollywood or Tollywood? I will not be able to answer that properly. I love all sorts of films actually. Like to be fair, one of my favorite actors is Vijay Sethupathi, and I have recently watched this Vikram Veda, the new one with Hrithik Roshan. So I also love Hrithik Roshan, but I still prefer Sethupathi over Hrithik Roshan. There's Far Fasil, like there are a lot of different people in a lot of different films. You can go for films like Sarapatta Parambarai from Tamil Nadu. It's a very good boxing film. Or you can go for Angamali Diaries, Bangalore Days. There are a lot of good films in the South industry. I'm not specifically Tollywood, but from that region of the country. While there are also very good films, like recently Kantara, I think, is getting a lot of fame and recognition. There's also this Gujarati film called Cello movie. While at the very same time, there's also this Bollywood documentary that came out a couple of months ago. It was called Kode Ko Jalebi Khilane Le Ja Raha Hoon. Sounds funny, but it was a very good documentary. So you cannot basically generalize if Bollywood is better than Tollywood or not. How to use VFX in films? My friend, that is actually a bit. Uh, hmm, I think it requires a bit more knowledge before we can discuss this because the thing is, using VFX in films, there are different softwares for it. There are different courses for it. I don't think it's that easy. VFX is one of the toughest part according to me when you are making a film. I try not to mess with VFX because see, VFX is something you cannot actually see. When I'm shooting something, I can see if the actor is doing the correct expressions and the actions. In VFX, you just have to like trust the other person who's doing VFX, like he'll be able to make this happen. And it'll look like genuine. So next we have Vijay Ajit, Kana. Sir, who's your favorite hero in Tollywood? Ah, favorite hero in Tollywood. Okay. Before that, I'll quickly answer the question: how to do green screen edit? So it's not that tough, but again, I think it'll come under the editing part. I would like to take more time, but I'm already over time. So I don't think I should be getting into this right now. But very quickly, I'll explain what happens. Uh, you light up the screen behind you, behind the character. You light up the character differently, and you basically put a rim light that we had discussed earlier in 3-point lighting to separate the character from the screen. Once you do that, there are different softwares where you can very easily take out the background and replace it with another. Favorite hero in Tollywood for me, it'll always be Sethupathi. No questions asked. Tollywood is Tamil films, right? I think it's Tamil films. What about tripod? What about the tripod? The tripod is an accessory, it's an equipment. It is not something you necessarily need to shoot a film. There are a lot of films that haven't been shot on tripods. For example, City of God is a film which is world acclaimed, world renowned, and it doesn't use tripod for like 80% of the film. It's just an equipment. Which movie is best for you to watch in Tamil? Mm, okay. I think I have another message from Shrihan. What do you suggest as the best editor? So I personally, my friend, prefer to use Premiere Pro, but a lot of professionals, since I'm not a professional editor, I do not get into different softwares. I'm good with Premiere Pro. I stick to it. But I think a lot of people prefer Avid and FCP, Final Cut Pro, for editing. Any contact info to further contact with you for career options? Definitely, I think you can talk to Madhuri ma'am. You might also find a couple of more you might also find a couple of people who are more interesting than me, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, but definitely it's not going to be a problem. Which is the best movie for you to watch in Tamil? So I'm not entirely sure if it was a Tamil film, but I would go for Sarapatta Parambarai. Was it a Tamil film? I think it was a Tamil film. Okay, Tollywood is Telugu and Tamil. Ah, okay, got it. Uh, I think we are done, so I'll quickly.
Yeah, I think we are done. So, anyone, just quickly text your questions. If you have any questions, just we have another minute to answer it.
Someone is asking how to do
Or
green screen edit.
or else you can mail the questions on madhuri@elixir.in. We can give you the answers there.
Shrihan, the answer to your question, like, what about free editors for people with low budgets, bro? There's this one thing called. I shouldn't be saying this on a live seminar, but okay. There's something called torrent, right? You can torrent things like Premiere Pro. And also on a very serious note, you can actually use DaVinci Resolve for that matter. It is also used for grading. What is grading? The guy who takes the cinematography workshop or the seminar will tell you. But basically, DaVinci Resolve is free. You can edit raw videos on it, and you can also color them up. So that's a great option. Uh, DaVinci Resolve doesn't work for you. Oh, Premiere Pro doesn't work for you. I'll give you the link, bro. Just drop me a mail. I'll give you the right link. How do you enter film industry? Well, I personally I personally studied at a film school. Not wasn't exactly a film school. It was a school which also had certain courses for films. Uh, from there, I basically contacted my seniors and other people, and eventually, like from one job to another, I got to the film industry. It's different for different people, I suppose. It doesn't work the same way for everyone. There's like not one specific way you can do that. Which camera is best for making movies? So different cameras have different specialities. There's Arri, Alexa, which a lot of people prefer. It can shoot low light, but when it comes to green screen and other things, a lot of people use red cameras. If you don't have that sort of a budget, a lot of people also for low light images go for Sony FX60, FX6, not FX6, yeah, F65, sorry. So different cameras can do different things, and as a DOP or as a cinematographer, you basically select your own kind of like which camera you want to work on. It's not like there's no specific answer to that. How to do green screen edit? My friend, like I said, basically taught you how to light a green screen. Like I said, basically just make the light even on the green screen and put some light on your character. Make your character stand out from the green screen, and after that, I think any software, even After Effects, can help you edit it out. You can watch a couple of tutorials on YouTube, I guess. It's very simple there. Which course is best for people who want to be an editor? There are different courses, my friend. So the best college in India where they teach you such things would be FTII or SRFTII, which is basically Pune Film Institute or Satri Film Institute. So yeah, also my email ID, I don't think I can type it in, can I? I don't think so. No. Sorry. Like I don't have an option to do that. It's not
Anurag,
like I don't want to.
you can put it on webinar chat. Can
I can.
everybody? Yeah, we can put there. I think they can
Okay.
see, or you can spell it out. They can write it down.
So it is EP, E for England, P for Peacock, 09, N for Netherlands, S for Switzerland, @gmail.com, which is basically EP09NS @gmail.com. So I think we have almost answered all of the questions. I will quickly just do this one thing. Sorry, give me a second. So, yep.
Yeah, I
Ooh.
think we have covered. I'll just
Dev Darshan,
share my
I
private.
shared it on the chat, but to go further, there's this one last thing I want you guys to know before we go any further. Like before we finish, I quickly like to share that with you from my experience, personal experience. So these are a couple of things I want you guys to remember. The first thing is anything artistic doesn't have specific rules. Like, in maths, there is one right answer to the question, and there are like only a couple of ways of getting that right answer. When you are making a film, there is no such thing. You can basically do anything and it might look great, it might attract more audience, and people might love it. So there are no specific rules. So just do what you feel like you'll be able to pull off. It has to be like it doesn't have to be something specific. It can be anything. Secondly, like I said, filmmaking is a process. So if you make films, don't be afraid. Don't think like, oh, I don't have enough lights, oh, I don't have this, oh, I don't have that, I don't have an actor. Doesn't matter. Start making films with anyone you have around you. And once you do, you'll like learn what sort of mistakes are you making. You might eventually realize like, oh, I probably need better actors. I probably need this, like a couple of props. Like I probably should have used this prop in that scene that did not work out, or okay, the action was wrong, it did not edit out. So once you start making films, you will realize all of that. So just like get on with it. Start making films. Unless you do, you'll never get good at it. Third, this is an important point because when we start, right, we start shooting with our phones. We basically use a couple of our friends and we can make a film. But the point is, you cannot make films alone. You still need a couple of friends, even if they are there just to act, or hold the camera, or help you with the lighting, or do anything. So always remember that it's good to have people on your side when you're making films. Do not attempt things all by yourself just because you want to. It's good if you have a couple of people on your side. The fourth point and the most important point is planning is the most important point of making a film. If you do not plan it correctly, you'll end up in different troubles during the shooting of the film, and they might discourage you from going any further. So always plan what you want to do. And lastly, films do not have to be made for a very specific reason. They can be made for whatever reason you like. So for me, I like to make films because I find them to be the best way to send a message. I know there are some friends of mine who make films because what they like, what they think would look visually great is something that they can portray on the screen. So they just shoot something like that and try to turn it into a film. While I know there are other people who just make films to entertain people, they don't have a message or a reason to make them. So films are what you make of them. They can be anything. They don't have to have a specific reason or motivation to be made. So, guys, from my end, I think I'm done. And
Okay.
I
Uh,
would, yeah,
I
I
think
would
you
just
have
like,
covered it up and it totally covered it up, and you have answered all the questions. So thank you, Anurag, for taking this session and taking out some time for, giving your experience thoughts to everyone here who have attended the session. Obviously, they will all have a lot of questions, so they'll connect with you through mail, so you can just answer them there. So for today, we are going to end the session, and for all of them, tomorrow we have another session on direction at the same time. So you all can join at 5 p.m. tomorrow for as you know now what is direction, and Anurag have already described you a little bit about direction. So we'll go on detail tomorrow. So yeah, okay. Then bye. Take care. Everybody bye.
yeah,
Bye Anurag. Thank you so
bye
much for
bye. Best of luck to everyone. I hope you guys end up making a lot of films in the coming few weeks or days or months, whatever. All right. Okay.
okay,
I hope I
bye.
did not bore anyone. So
No, no.
I'll take my leave.
Okay, bye. Thank you.